Rarity does not always equal value when it comes to comics, and I think that this is a common misperception that a lot of people have. And so in this video, we are going to attempt to address this. Stay tuned. Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. In this video, we are going to talk about rarity not being equal to value. And I believe that this is a common misperception that a lot of people have. If only it were that simple, right? That rarity automatically equals high value. And if this were indeed the case, you could look at books like Whitson issue number 3, for example, a book that I have in my collection. This is actually the first appearance of Mr. A character that was created by Stephen Ditko that actually served as the inspiration for other characters like Rorschach and The Question. This book is a rare type of book, especially if you're talking about high grade. But I can tell you that this is not an expensive book. It is rare, yes. It is obscure, yes. But it does not have a price tag that is anywhere in the millions of dollars, not even hundreds of dollars, to be honest with you. Another book that readily comes to mind for me is Graphic Fantasy issue number 1. And this too is a rare book. It's literally written on the back side of the book itself. Eric Larson issued this book back in the day when he was a teenager. He wrote it, illustrated it with a couple of friends, and he literally wrote on the back side the print run for this comic in his own handwriting. This book, again, rare, obscure, yes. Valuable in the millions of dollars? Unfortunately not. But we could literally write out a massive list of books that are rare that do not have major price tags associated with them. So it has to be more than just rarity that drives value when you're talking about comics, and probably other collectibles as well. Comic values are actually driven by two things. Two factors go into the math. One of them is supply and the other is demand. By talking about rarity and just focusing on that, you are only speaking to one part of the equation, that being supply, while ignoring the demand side of things. In many ways, it is the demand that actually drives not just the prices for comics, but also the values as well. And it really is that intersection between supply and demand that will drive crazy values. We see this to some degree or another with a book like Hulk 181, which is the first appearance of Wolverine. This book is in high demand. It is in high demand because Wolverine is arguably one of Marvel's best known superheroes. But in addition to that, there is a lot of excitement about Wolverine potentially appearing in the MCU. So there's a tremendous amount of demand. But on the other side, there is also a lot of supply. And even with that supply, you see high prices and high values for this comic. So this is just an illustration of how both sides, to some degree, will feed into something actually happening. When you look at super rare books like Action Comics issue number 1, or the first appearance of Batman, or even the first appearance of Spider-Man, what you see there are truly some rare books, oftentimes also in high grade. And again, it's that convergence of the rarity, the supply, with the demand that drives those crazy high prices for comics. It is not just one part of the equation that is driving everything that is being seen. And this is a question, honestly, that I get from a lot of people. I have people that will reach out to me and say, hey, Reggie, I have this rare comic. There's only one or a handful of them on the CGC census. Well, the problem with that is that just because they're not showing up on the CGC census does not mean that they're not out there in the world. There could be a lot of raw copies of that comic out there, but because there is no demand, because there is no price tag really that warrants people submitting them, that's why they're not actually showing up on the census. The other thing that you have to remember is that there are multiple census, right? There is the CGC census, so you have to look there. There's also the CBCS census, so you have to check that census as well. And as I mentioned, the biggest slice of the pie might actually be the raw market as well. So simply just looking at the census will not tell you the full and complete story about the rarity of a comic. People will oftentimes also say to me that they have a rare book because it's a 9.9 or a 10. Well, that is a great thing. Don't get me wrong, but just because there are not a lot of books at that specific grade does not mean that that book automatically has some value, especially if there is no demand for that comic or for the character that is captured within that comic. So again, rarity in and of itself is not necessarily always equal to high values. As of late, I've been getting a lot of questions about print run sizes from people, and I think folks are asking this question because they understand that they are only getting part of the picture through the census data. They recognize that the biggest unknown is around the raw comics, and I think that they are trying to address that unknown by finding a resource that provides the print run information. Unfortunately, no such data exists. The best that we have is to know what was actually sold into comic shops in North America, and we can get that data from Comic-Con. But what we don't know is what was actually printed, right? Comic-Con tells us what was sold, and we can assume that if they sell X, there's probably a larger number that was actually printed to handle, damages and things like that. Again, this is still one of the biggest unknowns when it comes to comics and collectibles. What was actually printed, and more importantly, what was destroyed and what remains out there. So there you have it. My hope is that this video has helped someone out there. As always, if you need to reach me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects.